What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. It is finally Friday, and it's finally time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday we recap all the major news and the technical chart patterns from all the major FAANG stocks. This week we had a major move in Tesla. After the company announced their Q3 earnings, shares of Tesla skyrocketed up over 25%. And folks, we are just several days away from all of these companies reporting their earnings. Will we have a similar move next week in Meta, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon as they report earnings as well? Or will some of them crash and burn and create buying opportunities? We'll talk about that and more. But we start things off like we always do with Meta Platforms. Start of the week at $573.29. I can't remember the last time I've seen this, but the stock basically finished dead flat on the week as you head into earnings. Now, the company is adding Reuters, which is a news media company that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. They're going to integrate their content in their AI chatbot. For those of you out there that are content creators or maybe young people trying to figure out a career, and maybe you're concerned about OpenAI being able to answer any question, write essays, and maybe eventually, as we'll talk about today, have artificial general intelligence. I will tell you that I think content is only going to get more valuable, and the way to monetize that content is only going to get higher and higher, as these AI chatbots are going to have to rely on human information. And Reuters putting theirs in the AI chatbot for Meta will allow maybe other competitors and other companies to continue to charge for that privilege. Now, Meta won a lawsuit, and this was a dismissal over a child safety allegations. If your memory is up to snuff, you recall that last week we talked about there was a court proceeding as it relates to child safety on Instagram. This is not a dismissal of that case. This has happened to be actually an investor or a shareholder lawsuit alleging that Mark Zuckerberg misled investors regarding the company's commitment to child safety. So that's nothing to do with the actual safety allegations. It has to do with if Mark Zuckerberg misled investors. So that trial that we talked about last week, which I think is probably going to cost Meta some bad press, but also lots of money, will continue to sludge forward. Now, Meta is going to introduce an AI model that can review the work of other models. And so we've got AI working with AI, and that's probably going to be the theme as you move into next year. Speaking of moving, we're moving on to Apple. Start of the week at $234.96, down about 1.5 as the iPhone maker finished the week at about $231.40. Now, the company did return to the top 5 of China-based smartphone markets. This is after we've seen a surge of Huawei technologies boosting its sales 42% year over year in the country. I think what this is going to have to force Apple to do is actually innovate on the iPhone. Okay. The iPhone has basically been more or less the same, certainly the last 5 or 6 years. Some people might even argue that it's basically been the same phone for the past decade. Huawei introduced a Z-shaped trifold phone. So not one that just folds like a wallet, but now you've got a trifold wallet of a phone. Those seem to be popular in China. And so Apple is going to have to innovate on the iPhone, bring out maybe a different type of model. I would assume probably within the next 2 years, they'll release a foldable phone. Now, Apple is dipping. This is always the time of the year when the iPhone gets released, and right before earnings, analysts start making their calls. And KeyBank says that iPhone sales continue to concern. Apple dropped as another analyst said that iPhone 16 orders have been cut by about 10 million units for the next several quarters going forward. Apple telegraphs some of their demand to their suppliers, and those orders have allegedly been cut. Now, the company is firing back a little bit with an executive saying that there should be a Macintosh announcement coming next week. It's likely going to be a new MacBook Air with an M4 chip. That certainly will be a very interesting and useful laptop. We'll see, though, if it draws any sales. What the company is hoping for is the fact that they're going to roll out iOS 18.1 that is going to roll out next week. These have the features. If you have one of the newer iPhones, you're going to be able to have those artificial intelligent features on your phone. And they're hoping that these features are good enough to get people like me who's sitting on an iPhone that's maybe several years old to go out and spend another $1,000 to buy a new one. Now, some Apple employees, though, believe the company is 2 years behind on its AI development. I don't think it's really that big of a deal for Apple. I think AI is still, I don't want to call it niche, but it's something that is not being used by the masses. As long as their device is more or less being used by the masses and used by large percentage of people in China, that is good enough for Apple, and they'll eventually be able to catch up on the software side or do like what they did and basically partner with OpenAI. Maybe they partner with Google Gemini, and my guess is they're going to take a chunk of money from these companies. Maybe Meta one day will provide the AI for Apple, so the company actually being years behind could actually turn into a revenue opportunity. Now, speaking of revenue opportunities that have gone amiss is the Vision Pro. Can't tell you how many times I talk crap on this product, saying that this is the most expensive set of ski goggles that you can't even probably ski with known to man. It is not surprising at all to me that Vision Pro production is basically come to a halt. And my guess is the company is going to cease actually manufacturing the product pretty soon. Now, moving over to Netflix. Start of the week at $7.60. The week after earnings from Netflix saw shares of the streaming giant down about 0.75%, finished the week at $7.54. Now, the company has reportedly closed its studio that was working on a multi-platform. So that's probably like Xbox, GeForce, Sony PlayStation, AAA title game. This is a game that you like to maybe release in GameStop, or certainly from a download perspective, and you're trying to charge $50, $60, $70 for this type of game. They hired a well-known studio and a well-known game developer, but I tell you what, not breaking any news here. Game development is tough, and I think Netflix found that out. Now, moving over to Nvidia. Start of the week at $139.87. And the chip giant was up over 1% this week to finish the week at $141.46. In fact, I think it eclipsed the most valuable company from Apple sometime during the week. Now, no surprise to you or anybody that is a subscriber to the newsletter, those links are always down in the description below. I wrote several weeks ago, or about 2 weeks ago, why Nvidia stocks could continue to keep climbing, and we analyzed the Blackwell chip. So no surprise there. And we'll show you evidence this week on today's show why you should not be surprised. Number one, Nvidia Jensen Huang figured out the Blackwell fault that was causing a little bit of a delay in production, and he said it was 100% his fault or Nvidia's fault. And my guess is even if it was Taiwan Semiconductor's fault, well, Jensen Huang's getting out in front of that, and that's why he's earning the big bucks. Now, they're going to supply AI processors to different industries, but more interesting here is they're going to boost their ties in India. Now, I'm not going to sit here and expect, even though we know that India has a vast economy and a vast population, it certainly is a developing nation from that sense. They're certainly not going to add any type of revenue to Nvidia that we can actually recognize when the company reports their earnings, probably about 2 to 3 weeks from now. It's just not going to show up. What this shows up on for me, and I got this take as I was driving yesterday. I was listening to Bloomberg, and they were actually talking about this story, and they had a guy on there, and he says what this shows is that Jensen Huang is tireless. This guy is worth so much money. He has finally turned his company into an over $3.4 trillion. He could sit back and just heap on all the praise and only call Microsoft and Amazon and Google, since those companies would buy an exponential amount of their chips. But instead, he's going to the country of India and continuing to expand access and the demand globally for his products. This man is tireless, and as long as he's with Nvidia, the company's probably going to be a winner. Now, Nvidia's supplier, here's all the great thing about the semiconductor industry is there's clues, because on the Nvidia chips are these high bandwidth memory units that SK Hynix happens to manufacture. And here's all you need to know about high bandwidth memory. And high bandwidth memory is almost exclusively going on Nvidia chips. You've got a little bit going on to AMD chips, but more or less it's an Nvidia product. Their HBM sales over at SK Hynix are up more than 70%. Folks, not year over year. They are up 70% from the previous quarter. So when Nvidia reports their earnings, oh my God, and maybe not necessarily this quarter, since Nvidia is pre-buying a lot of raw materials to put onto the Blackwell chip, which is probably going to ship more in the first and second quarter of the calendar year next year. But that just gives you a clue of the type of demand. If Nvidia is seeing that type of strong demand and forward demand, and SK Hynix is basically reinforcing it, well, it's just showing you the next several quarters for Nvidia should absolutely come to the high-end estimate, which was exactly what our newsletter talked about. This was several weeks ago, where there's this varying belief on where Nvidia is going to come in from an estimate standpoint. And I made the argument that all the evidence that we're seeing is probably that they're going to come in at the high end of those estimates. And SK Hynix saying just quarter over quarter, they had 70% increase on their HBM sales. And again, HBM goes right next to the expensive Nvidia GPUs that they're saying. Here's the other thing, is that the sales of HBM are up over 333%. Just over the past year. Now, Taiwan Semi is not subject to a U.S. probe. There was some belief that Huawei was getting chips made by Taiwan Semiconductor, and maybe Taiwan Semiconductor was dealing with them directly, but it appears that Taiwan Semi was selling chips to a supplier who then would pass those on to Huawei. So it's somewhat of Taiwan Semi's problem, but they are not going to be subject to the probe, as they don't have full control over their products after they leave the factory. Moving on to Google, start of the week at 164, up about 1%, to finish the week at 165 and some change. Everybody is kicking Google why they're down, as their partnership with Anthropic is formally going to be probed by the United Kingdom. This comes as the company is facing some competition threats from Perplexity. You got to say that kind of slow when it's a Friday, as they are serving up 100 million queries each week. My guess is Google probably serves maybe 100 million queries in an hour. So we're not exactly looking at a competitor that is completely nipping at the heels of Google, but certainly one that they'll have to keep an eye on. Now, moving on to Microsoft, start of the week at 418, wow, this is strong this week, up over 2.4%. Finish the week at 428. I'll give you all of the earnings dates when we get over to the technical segment, so you want to stick around for that. Now, OpenAI, this is an interesting headline. Some things you can read into this one way or another. Now, OpenAI has dissolved its safety team. That may be alarming, or maybe if you're an investor, it's great. Their head advisor for AGI, which is artificial and general intelligence readiness, departs. So this is telling me one of two things: that either OpenAI is not even close to AGI, or that AGI is going to release like in the next 24 hours or something. You know, you get my picture. Like, they are either epically close to releasing something that, at least in their opinion, is AGI, that it's scaring the safety team, that they have to basically get dissolved so they don't slow down the process of it. And the advisor of AGI readiness is departing because he's like, well, we're ready for AGI because it's here. Or that it's so far away that we don't need a safety team, and then we don't need to be ready, have an expert on staff to be ready for it. My guess is that we're probably closer than we are farther from it. Now, September video game sales are down about 6% in the United States, led by a sharp drop in console spending. I think we can understand that the console spend, most people that wanted an Xbox or a new PlayStation 5 or a newer PlayStation 5 have already bought one, and the fact that less people are playing video games, maybe they're doing something else with their time. Now, Microsoft is going to start offering AI autonomous agents in the next months on their Copilot operating system, and it'll be interesting to see if there's any use cases that come from that. Now, moving on to the stock of the week, Tesla started the week at 216, and boom, this thing got in one of Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets and shot up over 24%. And not only shot up 24%, but continued to run, as shares were up over 3% just today, to finish the week at probably Elon Musk approved $269 and some change. The company reported their Q3 revenue, which we talked about in depth on the last video that we posted here on the channel. Revenue was up 7.8% year over year. I don't think the company really gave guidance for the upcoming quarter that really gave us a ton of confidence that it was going to be over and above expectations. But Elon Musk very confidently, and he often says things very confidently that don't become reality, at least in the timetable that he says. Now, the thing about Elon Musk, guys, is if we rewind time 10 years ago, everything he has said about Tesla has more or less come true. Now, it has not come true in the timetable that he says, but that is actually an effective management strategy. I'm certainly not getting paid by Elon Musk here to kind of pump him up. I'm just saying that him saying things publicly, saying, hey, next year, we're going to increase sales 20 to 30%. Full self-driving is going to come next year. Though Cybercab is going to become full production by the end of 2025. He's saying those things, yes, to Wall Street, and Wall Street takes them literally. But who he's saying those things to is actually the employees that are responsible to make this happen. And he was very bullish on the conference call, saying that the company will have 20 to 30% unit growth next year. I am going to put together a video. It'll likely get posted on the Equity Empire channel. Links to that down and below. I'm going to put a price target on Tesla. I think we got enough information that we can back into some valuations and potentially a share price for Tesla. I don't know off the top of my head if it's going to be significantly higher or lower than today's share price, but I'm going to go through the exercise, the math, kind of put together a model. I will share that to you likely this weekend. So more details on that to come. Now, autonomous driving firms continue to raise fresh capital as obviously Tesla has put the spotlight on that industry. Waymo continuing to raise money, which operate about 1,000 vehicles. I think just under 1,000 vehicles in San Francisco, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. And you also have China's WeRide. So I think China's probably going to end up having their own market. I think that's fair to say that the autonomous vehicle and the mobility of people is probably going to be a big enough thing where they're going to give that to a domestic firm. It's not like coffee or like Nike sneakers where a company can come in there and capture significant market share in the country. I think all the U.S. companies like Tesla, like Waymo, many of these other companies, they're basically going to get shut out of the Chinese market unless you have like some drastic change from a geopolitical perspective from both countries, which I don't anticipate happening. Now, here's a real serious discussion, though, is we are about a week away from the elections here in the United States. Whether or not we understand or know who's won the election might take several days, might take a week. We might know even before Tuesday who wins. There is some people predicting that based on early voting, you might be able to actually tell who wins. So we'll see. But really what we know, and this is the reality, is Elon Musk has hitched his wagon to the former president. And if the former president wins, then Elon Musk's next 4 years will be, I think, relatively smooth sailings. He'll probably find that in some cases, former President Trump will pass things, say things, and do things that contradict some of the stuff that Elon Musk is trying to accomplish, both at his company level, but also maybe environmentally and those types of things. I don't think Elon Musk particularly minds that. Now, the complicating situation for Elon Musk is if Mr. Trump does not win, then the next several years for Elon Musk is going to be an absolute nightmare. All of these press outlets are they already do this, but it is going to amplify over the next 4 years, really regardless, but it'll be particularly amplified if you have a Harris administration return, as conversations with the bad guy, Mr. Vladimir Putin, started to raise red flags at the United States. And so they are going to be tapping this guy's phone. Elon Musk, every conversation that he has is being listened to by the United States government. Every text message that he sends, they have access, I'm sure, to his direct messages on Twitter, anything encrypted. They have access to it. That's what I would advise Elon Musk in any conversation that he has, is that somebody from the government is listening. That's not being paranoid. That is, if you really think about these things, that has actually been proven time and time again. Now, the DOJ has warned that the Elon Musk super PAC that is giving direct cash to people that sign a petition, $1 million. I think if you just signed the petition, you got like $45 or something. And now they're awarding people $1 million every day until the election. And it's just a straight giveaway. And the DOJ is probing this. Now, if Bill Gates did this for Kamala Harris, or if Mark Cuban did this, there would be no investigation. And so that is what Elon Musk is going to be up against. and we'll see how he handles it. For those of you that are worried about him and worried about Elon Musk and think he's doing the wrong thing, I urge you to go pick up a copy of his autobiography. What you're going to find is that in the center of chaos is exactly where Elon Musk wants to be. And the more chaotic things are, and the more pressure that he has on him, and the craziness that we witness around him, the more he actually likes that. Believe it or not. Now, moving over to the technical segment of the show, we saw a little bit of a pullback in the S&P 500 just over the past couple of days. Perfectly normal as we're moving into a very critical earnings season just over the next couple of days. Will it be enough to just continue to power us higher to a new high? Certainly the elections and earnings, I could see a scenario, and I'm not saying one candidate or another, but there are scenarios where you could get this thing to move higher. Split government, no matter who wins, I think is good for the S&P 500. So in some cases, maybe a Trump sweep could potentially be viewed by some people as good for the markets, because then you certainly are not going to have unrealized gains tax. You probably have lower corporate tax rates and those types of things. Now, moving to Meta, this one's pulled back from a very logical range. We will have Meta earnings next week on Wednesday, October 30th. It is setting up here at the top. Will Meta be able to announce something on their earnings call to power this one to a new high, well over $600 per share, or will it get rejected there? The exciting thing for non-shareholders of Meta, or people that want to build a bigger position in the company, is a rejection. You're looking probably at 460. This one trades down to 460. You would be very, very, very excited. Now, Apple is looking absolutely beautiful. You are making a series of higher highs, more or less confirmed with the most recent price action. You obviously got higher lows as well. You also have earnings on October 31st. So on Halloween, we will be doing some earnings videos for Apple. That will be a big one. Will Apple, very similar question for all of these companies, will they be able to announce something on their conference call from a revenue, sales perspective, outlook perspective to push this to new highs? Certainly a buyback, increased dividend. That's something that Apple can do. I don't think sales and guidance, or they don't even give guidance, but any sales number from Apple or optimism of future sales, I don't think that's going to be enough to push it higher. But if the company's like, oh yeah, we're going to buy $100 billion of our stock over the next couple of years, then that would be probably enough to send it higher. You get pullbacks on Apple starting around 210 will be exciting. Amazon will report their earnings also the same day as Apple on October 31st. Company is also setting up near the top, slightly different position though. We've more recently made a series of lower highs, but not confirmed by series of lower lows. This was what we call kind of a classic kind of wedge or flagging pattern. You tend to break out of this one. Obviously, most patterns you break out of, but you tend to break out at a pretty big rate. Some people would say you actually break out to the width of the flag. So you can have a big move higher on this one, all the way to like the top of the channel, continuing the uptrend that you've been in since 2022. If you have a breakdown on this one, you'll have a massive likely breakdown, maybe back all the way to the 150s, which we saw after the previous earnings report. Which way Amazon goes, obviously not sure. If you knew, you'd probably be rich and you'd already have your bet placed and you'd be lining up your new G5 that you were going to buy with your options trade. But I would say with this one, there's opportunities one way or another with Amazon. Any deep pullbacks certainly will be bought. Now, moving over to Netflix, we saw a little bit of deterioration for the company right before earnings. They've gapped and moved higher. So if that's an indication of the rest of these companies, where they're going to go, well, this one's certainly proving that these companies can set up at the top of a range, report earnings, and just continue to churn higher. Now, speaking of churning higher, look at Nvidia. My God, this trend is still intact. It is looking absolutely beautiful. We just confirmed, I think that's enough to confirm a new higher high on this one. The exciting part is you're basically kind of retesting the middle of the channel. In fact, you're not even really retesting that area. This one can continue to drift higher, particularly if you have strong results and strong commentary this week from Google, Amazon, Microsoft on data center spend. They continue to give bullish kind of CapEx guidance into next year. Well, that'll certainly fuel the speculation and really the reality that Nvidia is going to gobble up all that. Now, Nvidia doesn't report their earnings until next month on November 20th. Now, moving on to Google, looking pretty good. Just holding this trend line, this black trend line. They're in kind of a weird technical pattern. You would like to see this one continue to move to a new higher high, which would take you up close to $200 per share. The company may do that. Potentially, that would be a pretty big move, but they could do that on Tuesday, the 29th. I don't think we have any indication from Google that they won't put up anything other than very, very solid numbers. But will the solid numbers be enough to push to a new high? I don't know. But they'll get a lot of questions also on the conference call about their legal issues that they find themselves in. Now, moving over to Microsoft, still looking absolutely beautiful. You would like to retest this high at some point up here at 465 when the company reports their earnings on Wednesday, the 30th. I tell you what, the middle of next week, don't call me. Don't ask for anything. I will be digging deep inside of these earnings reports. Wednesday, the 30th, Microsoft will report. Will it be enough to push us to a new high up here to like 485? Or will we break down from here? I've got a green box just underneath price. If we do break down, it will look somewhat ugly technically, but if you stretch this one out like a much larger time frame, it'll be just kind of a bend in a curve that continues to move higher. Now, speaking of bends, speaking of curves, speaking of moving higher, oh my God, the bulls, this is exactly what you wanted with Tesla. You wanted to take out this high that you made back in September right here at 264. You've confirmed that. You have another high here at 269 where the stock has kind of found some resistance. It's also kind of crapped out at this area back in 2023. With Tesla, you would like this one to continue to move higher, meet some overhead resistance right at 295, 300. The really bull case scenario is that this purple trend, let me highlight this all in purple so you guys can see this. What you're hoping for with Tesla is we've been going sideways since basically November of 2020. You're hoping to put that behind you with Tesla, and you're hoping this is the new upward trend and that you made a low back here in April down here at 140, and you are just going to churn higher on this one. If the company is going to be able to execute on its plan, which we'll talk about in a future video with our price target with Tesla, can it continue to churn higher? If it's able to execute, again, I'll outlay a model and potentially some valuations for Tesla, probably give you a little bit of a range, like a high-end kind of optimistic version of Tesla's price target and maybe a low-end, since, again, I think the company gave us enough indications, and also this is a high enough volatility stock where it's going to be very similar to Nvidia. There's going to be a lot of people that doubt the company of Tesla is going to be able to do it, and if they do, well, shares will continue to churn higher. We obviously heard from Tesla this week, and we'll hear from the rest of these companies minus Nvidia next week. I look forward to seeing you guys here on the channel. Thanks for your support. Don't forget, down in the description below, there is links to the newsletter. There is also a link to the alternative channel, which you'll want to subscribe to as more content will be posted there. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a safe weekend, a fun weekend, and maybe go buy some food and some water and have that just on standby as we're rolling into some very potentially volatile times. So I hope things are well, and I'll see you again next week. Good luck with your investments.